David Woodbridge, as we bring you engaging interviews from guests, interaction from our one-of-a-kind distribution partners, stories that'll take you off the beaten path, current promos, shows where you can find us, and so much more. So stick around. Hey everybody, and welcome to episode 18 of Seeing Things Differently, where we are an adult. That's right, the podcast is 18. David, how did we get here?
I don't know. I think we've gone through some sort of time warp, alternative reality type stuff, and we've suddenly arrived at 18, at least legal drinking age, so to speak, here in Australia. And when I'm saying drinking, I'm, of course, talking about cups of tea and so on.
Well, we have made it to episode 18, and thank you all for listening and coming along the journey with us. And of course, if you have anything that you want to see us cover in future episodes, reach out to us. Don't be shy. We'd love to chat, and we'd love to hear from you. So podcast@humanware.com if you'd like to get in touch with us. And today, we have a very special guest, and we are kind of continuing the conversation that we started last episode, which was episode 17. So if you haven't, go ahead and catch up with that in your podcast catcher of choice, and that is kind of the accessibility in the workplace. And we have another professional on today who's going to tell us about her tech journey and career journey, and we are just going to have an absolutely amazing time talking. And then stick around, of course, for the Hot Topic / Debate segment of the month, where we'll be discussing, well, you'll have to stick around to find out. Rikki Enger is here. She is the Director of Practical Help at the Hadley. Is it school? Is it institute? She is going to tell us all that and more. So, Rikki, welcome to the podcast. David and I are thrilled that you're here.
Thank you so much for having me. I am delighted to be here. So it's funny, it's just Hadley now. It was Hadley School for the Blind and Visually Impaired, and then it was Hadley Institute. Now it's just Hadley. I don't think there's much more shortening that we can do. I don't want to just be Haddle.
Yeah. Well, that's wonderful. I know Hadley has been around for a very long time. I took a Transitioning to Unified English Braille course through them quite a number of years ago now. It was fantastic. But before we start where you are, let's start with where you've been. Tell us a little bit about you, maybe your journey with Braille, and then we can kind of hop into maybe your tech and your career journey, if that's okay with you.
That sounds awesome. So, yeah, I grew up in a very small town. I was the only blind person in that small town. And I have to say, people didn't quite know what to do with me. I don't know if that was because of blindness or any number of other things. But I will say that for me, Braille was one of those things that I really feel like it changed the trajectory of my life. Not to be dramatic, but having come from a family who weren't readers, and then being introduced when I got to school to this whole new world of, you mean I can grab a book or a magazine and just dive into that story and be lost for hours and hours? It was wonderful, and allowed me to do things like participate in spelling bees, and, you know, if you read enough books, you got a pizza party or whatever it is. So reading has always been such a passion of mine, and it definitely shows up in the workplace. I didn't, become a librarian or anything, but certainly Braille is one of those things that has carried me through quite a lot. So I graduated college. My first job was working with a recruiting agency for people with physical disabilities, and there was a lot that went into that. Essentially, our function was to get people placed in employment, and sometimes what that meant was just connecting them with the right people. But a lot of times it meant doing a bit of work before that career could take place. Maybe they needed some Microsoft Office training in order to be ready for the workplace, or resume writing, interviewing skills, all of these things that perhaps they hadn't had a chance to put into practice. And so I did that until I became a parent. Took a couple of years off to raise my son. Then jumped into wearing several hats for a company called Tech. And there I did some sales, some tech support, some podcasting, and just about every other hat you could think of. And it was great because I never knew from one moment to the next what I would be doing in a day. Fast forward a bit, and after Tech, I did web accessibility testing. So essentially checking out websites and apps from anything from Fortune 500 companies and airlines to small businesses. I worked as a consultant, but I worked with a company of consultants, if that makes any sense. And we showed people sort of, hey, this is what's wrong, this is how you fix it, and this is why it should matter to you. And that was amazing in that it was a chance to talk about the importance of things being accessible to everyone. So not just blind or low vision people, people with motor difficulties, or people who were deaf or hard of hearing, but it all came down to if you can design this in a way that is universally accessible, whether that means you do have either a temporary or permanent disability, or you don't, and you just happen to be in a situation where, hey, I'm out in the sunlight and this glare makes it so I can't read my screen. Well, you know what? There are ways that you can design your site or your app so that even in those situations it works for you. Yeah. And sadly, sometimes that's what it took for people to be motivated. Oh, you mean me? This could affect me? Okay, sure, we'll fix that.
That's usually what it comes down to. It's unfortunate that we can't, be more, I guess, empathetic, until it kind of hits us directly.
Exactly.
I love that you've been able to do that. And it sounds like you've had quite, a number of jobs. And we haven't even gotten to your work with Hadley yet. I know I want to get there. But through all your jobs, I just had a quick question. How have you done any type of training or kind of preparatory work for your jobs? And how has Braille maybe helped you in that process?
Braille has been essential in so many ways. And I would say that when it comes to, so just going back to doing some interviewing or resume writing, that kind of thing, one of the big things with making sure that someone whose livelihood may depend on how their resume looks, you got to be able to proofread that. And often doing that through audio, there's a lot you're not going to catch. And so having the ability to look at not only how things were spelled, and that's always been a passion of mine, is just the shape and the rhythm of language and how things come across in text. I love that. And it's so important to make sure that things are coming across in the way that you intend. So doing that sort of proofreading, but additionally, if you can then, at the time it was printing it out in Braille, now you would use something like a Monarch, but if you can check out the formatting of something and just easily scan down through and see, oh, there's a spacing error, or there's, some sort of issue with that shouldn't be italicized. How did that even happen? Things like that. That was essential. And probably the biggest way that Braille continues to be so important to me is the ability to reach over and jot a note or read a note without being influenced, I suppose, by audio. So Rachel, David, you know this. If you're doing podcasting, which I've done a bit of, part of that is doing some active listening. And so you're paying close attention to what your guest is saying so that you can have an intelligent follow-up with them or interject wherever you need to. And having any notes that you want to refer to in Braille makes it so much easier to really be in that moment and paying attention and not being, okay, there's 50% eloquence and 50% guest.
We are chuckling because, yes, we know it's so hard to keep track of, a lot of different screens, right? We have our program that we're all using to record this. There's that screen. There's, my notes screen, and sometimes it's just easier. Let me put this in Braille.
Oh, definitely. Having something that you can refer to regardless of how noisy the environment is, regardless of, my Bluetooth headset unpaired itself, or any number of other things that can and do happen. Having some notes that you've made to yourself is amazing. And even you mentioned travel, being on the plane where it's really, really loud. I always find that I get my best reading done just trying to block out the world with my little Braille display, reading until I get to my destination. And then, of course, there are things getting a bit more practical, I suppose. But if you're doing any sort of interaction with people, whether that's sales or emails or anything where it matters that you acknowledge a person's name, it shows that you're paying attention to those little details. There are names that you could hear them and think, I know how to spell that. And you would be very, very wrong.
Yes. I check just out of habit now. Because even, like you said, a name I think I would know how to spell. There's a lot of different variations, for people from different countries or just different spellings. And I want to make sure that I show people the respect they deserve by spelling their name correctly.
So often we hear about how Braille is going to be obsolete soon. We have audio. We're not going to need Braille anymore, and nothing can get me going quite like that. But that'll be a soapbox for a different episode, perhaps. But, even if you are learning Braille later in life, maybe you didn't lose your vision until later, and you think, well, why do I need to know Braille? I'm not going to be reading novels, or War and Peace is not on my list of literary accomplishments for Braille. Nope. Even if you don't want to do that, there are so many practical uses for Braille. We put them on our spices. We put labels on the microwave, or even people can put labels on medication to tell the difference between those things. And even if you're not a super fast Braille reader, if you know a few letters, then you can use that to differentiate, or write down a phone number, like you just said, David. So there are so many things that you don't have to be fast at it. No. You don't have to be amazing at it. It can find a place in your life regardless.
So this, I think, segues really well into, Ricky, you are the Director of Practical Help at Hadley, and we were just discussing some very practical uses for Braille. But tell us a little bit more about what you do. Like, what sorts of practical help do you offer?
I can talk about what Hadley does, because I like to say that we are about 100-year-old startup. And the reason I say that is because the Hadley, which has been around for 100 years, it's a really cool story. It was a guy, an educator, who lost his sight later in life due to a bout with the flu, apparently. And he was an English teacher, so as you can imagine, he loved reading and decided, well, I'm not going to stop reading. And maybe there were audiobooks or just starting to come to fruition at that time, but he thought, I need to learn Braille, not only to read my literature, but for other things as well. And he noticed, I can't be the only person who is in this situation, needing to learn Braille, and perhaps didn't go to a school for the blind, didn't lose their vision until later in life. And so he created Braille by mail. So it was distance learning before distance learning was cool. And after that, it progressed from Braille to any number of other things, learning Braille music. We had a GED course at one point for people who didn't graduate high school and still wanted to. We did math, and I think there were gardening courses and just about anything you could think of. They were approached in sort of an academic way where you would have an instructor and you would get a grade at the end of the thing. And it worked great for a lot of people, but what we found was that there were a number of people who were falling through the cracks, and those were the older adults who were new to vision loss. So they would walk into these conversations almost in the middle. The doctor would say, "There's nothing we can do for you. Good luck," and send them on their way because there was nothing medically that was going to happen after that. And so here they are, and if they are Googling, if they're able to see the screen well enough to still do that, or maybe there's a family member doing so, and they hear about one thing and another, but all of these terms don't always make sense. It's like walking into the sea of acronyms, O&M, AFB, ACB, NFB, NLS. What is all that?
Right.
No idea. And all of the materials that are produced assume that knowledge. They assume that you have spoken to someone in some sort of state or local service for blind or low vision people, and a lot of these people had not. So they were looking for help, whether that was adjusting to vision loss emotionally, socially, things like that, or whether it was the side that I work with, which is practical help. How do I use my microwave now? How do I tell when my food is done? Or how do I clean my house and be sure that I have mopped the floor appropriately and there's not one big spot that I've missed?
Yeah.
How do I use my iPhone or my Android device or my computer? So all of these things that people are wondering how to do, that's the sort of material that we now produce at Hadley. And it's not a graded course. Rather, it's a series of bite-sized videos, but essentially the videos are, it's audio, that's the main content, and then there are illustrations of what it might look like on your iPhone screen if you're zooming in or you're making things larger or changing contrast or whatever it is. And you don't have to see to get what you need out of the videos, but if you can, it's extra information that you may find helpful. One of the things that we do, the Braille program is certainly alive and well at Hadley, but it has a different approach now. It used to be that you would kind of learn the history of Braille and you would learn all sorts of things before you ever touched a Braille letter. And now the idea is, let's get you using it right away. So you get a book with 3 letters, and it's the first 3 letters, and you'll see those letters in different configurations. You'll learn to recognize them, just a line of A's or a line of B's, or a few A's and then a full cell, and a few B's and a full cell. And really that's because if you're not accustomed to taking in information with your fingers, that is as much a part of the learning process as learning the symbols themselves. And
Totally.
so,
Yeah.
We've got people learning those first 3 letters, and then, okay, here you go. Here's a couple of stickers. You can put these anywhere on something in your house that starts with an A or a B or a C, or do whatever you want with it. And they start to make use of it.
Getting back to sort of the practical use of Braille in the recording type stuff too, because most all the podcasts that I still do, I actually have Braille notes actually sitting on my lap on my Braille display. And because there was just no, like Rachel was saying, there was no way, and you mentioned this too, Ricky, there's no way that I could concentrate on audio. It's like, point 1, point 2, point 3. Whereas I can actually read down in Braille. And sometimes when I'm reading in the Braille down my notes, I go, hang on a minute, point 9 should have come before point 4, even before I start recording. And then I change it around and muck about with it. But yeah, I just find the ability to be able to do that really good. I had a webinar yesterday as we're doing this recording today, and I had to write down about 10 different websites, and they were all very similar names. And I thought, yeah, there's no way I'm using that with speech or memory or anything else. I'm just going to read
Right.
them. And somebody said to me, how do you know all these websites? And I said, I've got it written down. That's how I know them.
That's where the magic is. Yeah.
Exactly. Or then somebody will, and then some know-it-all in the audience will go, so you're not actually writing them down, so to speak, are you? It's like,
We're not ready for that
come
debate.
on.
Is it
Oh, no.
listening? If you're listening to a book, are you reading it? Yeah, that is
That's it.
not
That's
the
the
debate
one.
topic, but that's,
No, it's not.
That's a
It
good
could
one.
have been, but it's not.
it should have been.
It'd be a 3-hour episode.
To bring it back to your work, I guess we ended where we started with your career journey. But what type of technology do you use, either in your current job or your past jobs? I'd love to know maybe some of your hobbies, and do you use Braille in those areas of your life?
While I actually haven't needed to ask for any accommodations in my workplace, I've always been about, if there is something that isn't working as it should, whether it is testing websites for airlines and pointing out where things are falling short so that people who come after me aren't going to have the same issue, or just figuring out more efficient ways to do things, say in Salesforce, which is something that we're using now. And Salesforce is incredibly powerful, and at least at my workplace, it's also incredibly cluttered too. So just figuring out those efficient ways to get around. And Braille is so helpful in all of that, whether it is being able to take notes on one device as I'm testing on another, or whether it is, again, reading information if I'm on the phone with someone and I don't want to be processing 2 audio sources. So just having that opportunity to read the information from their record and not have to ask them to repeat things they've already said because it's right there. That has been so useful for me. So believe it or not, we're going to come back to Braille again because my main hobby is reading. So whether that's reading in Braille or reading in audiobooks, you probably can't find me after hours without a book. So I like reading books. I end up talking about books in my workplace because we have a book club for the
wow.
Community who wants to join it. So isn't that awesome that I get to talk about a thing that I love?
Yep.
I also love cooking. I can't say I'm amazing at it, but sometimes that is one of those things that you don't have to be good at something to enjoy doing it. And I think cooking is that for me. I like learning new techniques. I like exploring different kitchen gadgets. I suppose gadgets are my hobby, really, whether it's technology or in the kitchen.
Yes.
Or any of that. Word games. I love playing any kind of word game, word play in general. I love that. And so nothing particularly out of the ordinary. Skydiving is not a hobby. I've never done that. But
Oh dear, I could just imagine zooming past on a jet ski, riding off into the sunset, or doing a bit of windsurfing, or canoeing down the rapids in some gorge somewhere. So, yeah.
hey,
No,
that's a previous guest. That was Mr. Wilkinson. He was
Yes, he is definitely a thrill seeker. Ricky, thank you so much for just sharing with us some of your story and your journey, and it makes us all so happy to hear how vital Braille is, both in the workplace, out of the workplace, just to life in general. And I love that it's not, all of Braille, but you also offer help with other types of either technology or adjustment to vision loss or cooking or cleaning. And it just shows, sometimes, we all need a little bit of help. Can you tell folks how can they get in touch with Hadley if they're listening and they think, I can maybe use a little bit of help with this, that, or the other thing in my life that relates to blindness?
Absolutely. So the URL is hadleyhelps.org. So HADLEYHELPS.org. We used to be hadley.edu, but kind of that shift away from academics. We're now hadleyhelps.org. We have information in Braille, in large print, or in audio. You can find our discussion groups, and I host a bi-weekly podcast called Hadley Presents there as well. You can also, in the U.S., it's a toll-free number. It's 800-323-4238. Love to hear from you.
Hey everybody, and welcome to the Hot Topic segment for this month, where we will debate a topic and get some really interesting sides of it, I think. We are still with Ricky Anger from Hadley and David Woodbridge, of course. So the topic for discussion is audio description. Would we prefer it to be either AI/text-to-speech given, or do we prefer the human-narrated audio description that has been added to a lot of movies and TV shows recently, which is wonderful that we have so much more content. I know growing up, I would get VHS tapes from the library with audio description, and we thought that was the greatest thing ever. But now with streaming and all of those content sources, there's a lot more. So David, I'm going to throw it over to you. What are your thoughts on audio description, and which method do you prefer?
There's a few things. So sometimes I think the people that write audio description should actually learn how to do audio description, because some of the audio description that I've listened to, you almost might as well not have it going at all, because it actually makes it sometimes even more confusing. So that's number one. Number two, and this goes sort of with audiobook listening as well a little bit, but sometimes the person's narration or even just their voice doesn't fit in with the movie. So you've got this really sort of, this very serious going on in the movie, and like, it might be somebody who's dying and it's in hospital and they've got carers around, and the narration voice is going, well, look, they've just popped into the hospital and they're about to have an operation, and she's standing there crying her heart out. It's like, dude, you really shouldn't be sounding all happy and fantastic doing the audio description, because you're doing an audio description. You need to be a little bit more, monotone, or be a bit quieter. Don't be so as chirpy as you probably should be. So I've noticed that a few times. I mean, I haven't noticed that for a while. So that's number two. Number three, and look, I know on some of the, particularly the Apple TV movies coming out recently, there was just so much happening on the screen that I sometimes wish that, how in the movies, when you go to a movie theatre, you've got a separate audio track that's sort of in your ear and in your, quote, listening/watching the movie in the theatre. I sometimes wish you could have a separate audio track completely, because that way they could almost talk over the characters speaking initially, or the action scenes going on. Because sometimes, they'll just go, door opens. It's like, okay, fine. What's so significant about the door opening? So if they had more time, it's like, yeah, the door's open, the person's just dived through there, laying on the floor, the rifle's raised and he's taking aim at whatever else it might be, an action-type movie. But they don't have enough time to give meaningful dialogue sometimes. And when it comes to AI, text-to-speech, or human narration, I'm sort of one of these people that, as long as I get access to information, I'm not too bothered. The problem I've got, and it probably happens more from a screen reading type point of view rather than AI doing it, but I'm assuming AI would do it. And that's because sometimes AI or text-to-speech thinks that everybody lives in the United States of America. So when you come, you're in Australia and all of a sudden you hear the person's just driven from Sydney to Washington, and you go, no, WA is actually Western Australia in Australia. It's got nothing to do with Washington, and I'm pretty sure that you can't drive a vehicle across the ocean.
You better have an amphibious car.
So probably those are my little bugbears. And I guess the other thing about getting back to that audio separate track, I've got a household of quote light dependent people, as some people refer them to, sighted people. And they absolutely cannot stand audio description. It drives them crazy. So if I could have like a separate thing, like I've got my Apple TV, for example, and I could say, okay, so I want you to send this audio track to my AirPods Max. Nobody else in the household has to listen to the audio track. That would be fantastic. Because I just get grumpy family members. I mean, yes, they're fully aware of the fact that it's audio description and Dad can enjoy the movie and blah blah blah, but they still don't like it. So that's probably my other thing that I'd love to see happen. But I'd certainly, at the end of the day, I'd prefer to have audio description in whatever form than not to have it at all. Your turn, Ms. Ricky. Talk to us.
All right. Okay. So I'm with David in that I would prefer audio description in whatever form.
Yeah.
I feel like there's some caveats there, because if we aren't pushing for quality audio description, then they can throw whatever at us and say, hey, it's good enough.
Right.
Is better than nothing. And so sometimes I feel conflicted about, the AI is good enough. And really, there are lots of talented people who can do AD script writing and AD narration. And in fact, there are blind voiceover artists using Braille doing this sort of thing.
Well done.
And so I want to push for that wherever possible. But I think that there's a difference in what I expect from a human narrator versus what I expect from an AI narration. So when there is a human audio description narrator, there are things that they can do to completely pull me out of the story. And one of those is exactly what David was talking about, where the tone just doesn't match what's actually happening on screen. And I'm thinking, do you know what you're reading for, or you came in and read some lines? Another part of that is figuring out pronunciations. So I was watching, I think it was Star Trek, Starfleet Academy, and they had a character. Her name was Tarima, and Tamira did this, then Tarima did that, then Tamira did something else.
Oh, no.
Oh, dear.
Whoops.
Yeah.
I was actually confused for the first couple of episodes. I really had to pay attention to figure out, what is your actual name? Because audio description keeps getting it wrong and pronouncing nacelles as nacelles and things that, as a fan, you just go, okay, clearly you don't know the property that you're reading for, and you haven't watched it, and there's not quality control at the end of it, listening to say, you've gotten this right, or you could do a bit more work. Now, if it were AI, I wouldn't go in with those same expectations. In fact, I would probably assume that it was going to get it wrong.
Yeah.
And as long as it got it wrong consistently, I'm okay with that.
Right.
There are people who are working toward this very thing for quality control in audio description, and getting the audio description narrators or writers the credit that they deserve, because in some of these instances, they don't even name who was voicing it, so you don't know who to praise or be mad at, depending on how good it was. And I'd like to see more of that. There are 2 points that I think David made that I found really interesting and feel a bit differently about. So one of them is the the family member discussion of, they hate it. And it sure would be nice if we could have something that only we could listen to. And
Yes,
I do
I agree.
absolutely agree with that part. What I found interesting is that I didn't use audio description for a very long time because I made assumptions that any light-dependent people in my house would be thoroughly annoyed and taken out of the story, and why do this for me when everyone else here doesn't need it? And it turned out not to be the case. My light-dependent people, for whatever reason, they actually appreciate it, and sometimes the audio description will allow them to catch something that they didn't notice on screen, either because they were off getting popcorn or because it just slipped right past visually.
Right.
And that was
True.
something that they noticed. So I feel like it's worth saying that certainly there will be those people like David's family who are just like, oh, turn this off. This is so annoying. I hate it. But maybe it's important not to, if you're listening and you think that's the case for your family, but you've never really put that to the test, it could be interesting to do that just to be sure. Maybe they end up liking it. The other thing I wanted to mention is the issue of having more description, so more time for description. And sometimes there will be things like you want to know what people are wearing because a costume is a part of whatever story is being told. That's not always true, but it can be depending on what you're watching. And there have been discussions about how to do this. So maybe you get the DVD and there is an extended audio track where you could just pause it, or there is an intro that describes some visual things that are never going to fit right there in the dialogue or the time that you have. I don't think anyone has quite figured it out yet. And for me, I'm thinking it's because I'm more of a reader. It's very easy to take me out of the story. And so I don't want to be distracted by anything, just keep it going, keep it going. I've got 2 hours that I've devoted to this, and now I got to get back to my book. So I'm less likely to want that sort of thing. But for those who do, and there are a lot, things are happening in that direction. I think we do both agree that for the most part, having audio description is better than not having audio description. If it comes down to it, I would much prefer the human.
I would too, yeah.
Really what I want is the quality. And I think if you're using AI, you probably haven't spent a great deal of time doing that quality assurance or thinking through anything other than the very basics.
Well, as always, I love these hot topic segments. They really kind of get us to talk about different issues of the day or different sides of something that we maybe haven't really investigated too much. All I really know is there is text-to-speech audio description and there's human narrated, and I'm just kind of like you guys happy that it exists. But just because it exists, Ricky, like you said, we can not be happy just with, oh, it exists and we will be grateful. No, let's make it better. Like, we have kind of the baseline. Let's improve that. Hey, everybody, and welcome to Trials and Triumphs. We are back this month with this segment, and I've got a fun one, and I know David's got some fun stories, but my story is dealing with computer repair, and this is still ongoing, so I don't know. Tune in next month, and I should have it fixed by then. But I have a Framework laptop, which is a modular laptop, and all that means is they give you a special screwdriver that you can unscrew the bottom, and they have very well-written guides that you can replace various parts. So I needed a new keyboard for this laptop, and I took the guide off the website, I put it through AI and asked AI to describe any images that it saw in a blind-friendly way, and it did. My guide was great, and I put it on the Monarch, and I read it in Braille, and I went on to replace my keyboard. Now, there were definitely some interesting aspects to that because the ribbon cable is very, very thin. And don't mistake that for a cardboard label like I did and tear it off the keyboard. Because then you will need to return said keyboard and get a new one before you can replace it. But I learned a lot in the process. Now, you may think, all right, you got a new keyboard. It's all fixed, right? Well, yes and no. Yes, I know now how to connect it, and I do have a new keyboard, and it's working fine. When I was exploring the insides of the laptop and looking where the connector went, I ended up disconnecting the wireless card from the main board. And because the pins are very, very small, it is very difficult to reconnect the wireless card and all of its associated cables. So I'm still working on this, hence why this is an ongoing trial and triumph. So my triumph was I replaced the keyboard. My trial is I'm still trying to replace the wireless, which is usually why I have stuck to building desktops, because the hardware is a lot easier to differentiate between. But that is my trial and triumph. And David, what you got? Because you've got something pretty great.
I'll start off with the less bad one, and the less idiotic one, and then I'll get to the idiotic ones. So what happened to me was I accidentally spilled a little bit of coffee in my keyboard on my MacBook. So I took it into the shop and I said to the dude, look, I'm really sorry, I accidentally spilled a little bit of coffee. So when he opened up the Mac and then looked under the keyboard, he went, yeah, it looks like you did more than a bit of a splash, mate. I think you might have actually dumped about a whole half a cup of coffee in your keyboard. And I went, well, now you mention it, maybe. So luckily he was able to, do the proper repair person and dry it all out and, do everything else, and it started working. And I picked it up in the afternoon. So that's the positive story. The really, really idiotic story, at least I'm concerned, is I yet again spilled coffee on my keyboard. Now, this time I panicked because I had to fly out to Singapore the next day to go and do a conference. So I spilled my coffee and I went, aha, I can dry this really quickly. And you probably start grunting when I say this, with a hairdryer. This head person gets hairdryer and goes, oh, if I set it on the highest hot setting, it'll dry out faster. So I turned it on, aimed it at the keyboard, and the keys on my keyboard started to melt. They started to deconstruct and flop over, and then I went, what have I done? Because it didn't occur to me that adding heat to plastic, certain types of plastic, will still melt, of course. So I took it back to my favourite repair person. He went, oh, no, you didn't do what I think you did. And I went, would you believe it was really hot? And I left it out on the table outside on my patio. He went, no. You're one of these stupid people, apparently, that actually tried to dry your keyboard with a hairdryer, weren't you? Went, well, maybe. So, again, this poor person, who's actually very good, he replaced the whole keyboard, and I was able to fly out to Singapore the next day. That's my that's my trial. My triumph for both was I got both fixed. I kept working, so I was able to go on. By the way, your repair to your frame. Sorry, what's your computer called again?
Framework.
Yeah, your framework computer sounds like you should be back in the 1980s and 1990s. Like, that's when I had to pull out sound cards and put in synthesizer boards and add modem cards. Like, what's this need to even go inside a computer in the first place? It's like, sounds horrible.
It sounds fun.
Oh, does it?
Because you can upgrade components as you need them. So the processor and the main board and all of that good stuff. So the idea is fantastic. If you're me and you were unfamiliar with all of the parts and the connectors, which always happens, when you see something new, then you're taking the scenic route and you're learning. So
lovely.
I'm sure it'll all turn out fine.
I'll just go with the David's mode of practice. If something breaks, I just go and buy a new one. Welcome back again. Now, our tips and tricks is going to be a quick one because I thought this will literally take you less than 10 seconds to do. It's probably going to take me 30 seconds to explain. So why this tip came about was because we're talking about accessing Braille access on your iOS device, iPhone or iPad. And of course, on your standard Brilliant BI20, BI40, or any other Braille displayer that has a input Braille keyboard, it's always dots 7 and 8. You press together with VoiceOver running to toggle on and off Braille access, where you can access your BRF files, you can do the editor, you can do live captioning, all that sort of cool stuff. Now, I was confronted with my Mantis Q40 the other day because I had to demonstrate Braille access. Now, because I don't often demonstrate Braille access on the Mantis, I suddenly thought, I can't remember how to do it. I haven't done it for about 3 months, so I just completely slipped my brain. So I quickly asked Beautiful AI, and they said, oh yeah, look, all you need to do is you press Control Option Y when you're running VoiceOver on the QWERTY keyboard. That turns on Braille keyboard mode. And then, of course, that turns the home row into your Braille keyboard key. So A is dot 7, and then S would be dot 3, and so on. So then you would press A and semicolon, i.e. dot 7 and 8, and that then allows you to activate Braille access. Now, sometimes that will not work, as I discovered when I tried this this week. So what I had to do was I had to toggle VoiceOver on and off, which is normally do when your things don't work. That didn't work, so I restarted my iPhone, restarted VoiceOver again just to make sure, reconnected the Mantis, and it was all fine. So the trick is, if it's not working when you turn on your Braille keyboard mode with Control Option Y when you're running VoiceOver, then just remember that you need to restart and do things, and then it'll be fixed. And just a final sort of a sub tip for this, don't get confused between the Braille access mode and the F12 function, which also turns on a Perkins style keyboard mode when you're just on the Mantis itself.
Hey everybody, it's time for the upcoming shows segment. From July 3rd through July 8th, we will be at the National Federation of the Blind National Convention in Austin, Texas. From July 7th through July 8th, we will be at Sight Village Central in Birmingham, England. If you happen to be in any of those places, please stop by our booth, come and say hello. We would love to chat with you. If you have comments or suggestions, we'd love to hear from you. Please send them to podcast@humanware.com. That's podcast@humanware.com. Thanks so much for listening to See Things Differently. We'll see you next month.
طاقة البطارية 70. مركز التحكم. تم الاختيار.